I'm Beth Johnson, and with me, as always, is scientist Franck Marchis, and this is Sci-Fi Reality Check, SETI Institute show where we overanalyze the science in recent science fiction shows. This week, we're talking about Season 2, Episode 2 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Ad Astra per Aspera. Spoilers abound, so if you haven't watched the episode, turn back while you still can. Hey, Franck, how's it going?
I'm good. I'm glad to discuss this episode number 2 with you. I wish we had done that in person, but another time.
Another time. Soon we'll have a studio, maybe.
Yeah, we're crossing fingers here. So we have a studio so we can see each other more easily.
All right. Well, let me give this summary of this episode, and I'll be right back. So Ad Astra per Aspera means to the stars through hardship. And this episode is the quintessential Star Trek courtroom drama, following on the legacy of those that came before in the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and even Voyager. This time, it's Commander Una Chin Riley as the defendant, facing a court-martial for lying on her Starfleet Academy application about being genetically modified. Genetically modified persons are not allowed in Starfleet, and in Una's culture, genetic modification was the norm. In Season 1, Una's lie was revealed, and she was arrested. Now we get this amazing courtroom scene that, for me, is second only to Commander Data defending his personhood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's... I think this is an episode of Star Trek that I will remember for forever, because it's a very interesting episode where they discuss the future of humanity, and they also put a parallel with what's happening in our modern world at the moment.
So, Franck, let's start by talking about genetic modification and perhaps why Starfleet is against it.
Yeah.
So is this a new concept? Where are we at here on Earth when it comes to genetic modification, and how does that lead into the show?
Well, genetic modification has been done by humanity for 100,000 years. I mean, what you eat is basically the result of genetic modification. At the time, we didn't know how to manipulate genes. So what farmers were doing, they were just basically choosing to grow plants, which was the most appropriate for them. So that's the way we got wheat, and that's the way we got fast and strong horses, or that's the way we had fruits and so on. Apple, pears, cows, all of these are not natural, meaning that they did not grow naturally on our planet. They were basically selected slowly by farmers who decided to choose this seed because it's coming from a tree which has largest fruit. And then this basically modified genetically those fruits so they became apple and pears and so on. So we have done that for thousands of years for the food and so on. And here what we're talking about is genetic modification for human beings, or for extraterrestrial being in this case, for the aliens. So that's something different. So why do you think the Star Trek is against genetic modification? Can you give us the background story here?
Well, some of it seems to be, it has to do with really one individual, Khan Noonien Singh. So if you're familiar with Star Trek, the original series, and Star Trek 2, you're familiar with Khan. Khan did genetic modification, basically trying to create advanced humans that could be better, stronger, faster, that kind of thing. And it caused a huge war. It was a very big deal. And at the end of it, Starfleet went, yeah, we're genetic modification is not allowed. This is not a thing we're going to do. To me, it's sort of similar to the whole time travel is not allowed that we come across later on in Discovery when we were talking about how they moved forward, and that was actually a very illegal thing to do. So I think this is a similar situation.
Yeah.
bad things happen, and therefore we've now banned it outright.
So that's a product of the eugenics war that we had on
Mhm.
Earth, basically.
Right.
Um, Captain Paddle say something very interesting. She At the beginning of this episode, she basically mentioned that um, genetic modification is is dangerous, and it's the way to. I'm trying to find the exact quote. Uh, is nothing else than playing God by interfering with DNA and removing genetic outliers, which who we endanger we endanger the very essence of natural evolution.
Mhm.
So the idea is that by modifying human being or extraterrestrial being, we're playing God and we're changing humanity, the true nature of humanity, by choosing basically the perfect human being and by not allowing to have these outliers that could be useful for other reasons.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, that's an interesting point. But then Mira, the lawyers who's defending, um, mentioned that laws are made to change, and genetic modification is illegal. But there is a lot of things that was legal in the past that became illegal in the future. And
Mhm.
what she's pointing out is that Starfleet should change the law to allow people who have been genetically modified to be part of Star Trek, because in fact the Ilarian is part of their culture to be genetically modified. It's not
Mhm.
something that we cannot judge. It's part of themselves to modify the kids so they have these new abilities or skills. And humans are basically judging this extraterrestrial species under their own history and then under their own view, which is could be draconian or radical in the mind of Ilarian. So I thought that was an interesting conversation about that. Why we why we are forcing as a civilization other civilization to think like us, where we could simply let them do what they do and adopt them into our Starfleet or our civilization, let galactic civilization, you name it, in the future. And that's something that will probably happen. We were not supposed to talk about that, but when you think about it, considering the diversity of civilizations we have on Earth and values which are very different, we will, when we find extraterrestrial species, face this problem. We will have to basically discuss with aliens who have a behavior that we think we judge to be abhorrent, to be inappropriate, but it's for them it's natural.
I think that's an excellent point. There's a lot of parallels with some of our own personal history here on Earth. I mean, obviously, that's the way Star Trek does it. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of parallels with things that were illegal that were once legal. You know, it's just we definitely have a history of. I mean, we've had issues with eugenics, of course, amongst humanity. So it's not a new concept. It's not something we haven't faced in our own culture. I do think it's very interesting here because we're taking it to this like advanced science level where parents are modifying their children before really they have the ability to consent to being modified. They're just doing it. It's just what they do. And I think that's one of the things that sort of rings um a little bit true or impressive to me was that that's the thing you have to take into consideration. She didn't have a choice.
Yeah,
This was the culture she grew up in, and sure, her parents knew that it wasn't a thing that was supposed to be done anymore, but how do you take an entire culture's you know basis for their belief system, the way they behave? How do you just say no, you can't do that anymore? That's and you have to look at like what harm is it doing to other people, and that's kind of where that whole trial came down to
yeah,
was at a certain point you have to say, is this doing more harm than good? and that's how they sort of she guided. I love the way that her lawyer, her friend, former friend, now friend again. Oh, it's complicated interpersonal relations, but I love the way she kind of guided it through that requesting asylum portion. That was really fascinating to kind of get through that. But and I'm sure we'll talk about it again at the end. But right now, let's talk a little bit more about where we are here today with genetic modification. What I know, a lot of people will say, "Oh, well, we have, GMOs is already like an issue," which is true. But as you pointed out, we wouldn't have things like the chicken that tastes and looks the way it is now if there hadn't been selective breeding and that kind of thing. So why are people opposed to sort of like this scientific, almost chemical genetic modification on the DNA level when selective breeding and hybridization in plants wasn't a problem before? So where are we at now, and what are we working on?
So where we are now is that people are bringing the idea that because we modify chemically plants with the GMO by changing the genes, basically, we are doing something different than what was done in the past. Because in the past, the human beings were basically using nature and randomization to get what they wanted. But now we target. Now we say, okay, I'm going to make up the things here. I want a carrot that glow in the dark. Well, I can change this gene and it will happen. And this carrot will glow in the dark and people will buy it. Okay? So yes, it's very focused. We know how to do this. So what is the impact of that? What is the impact of consuming genetically modified foods? We don't really know. And a lot of scientists say, well, there is no proof that if you eat a carrot with glow in the dark, you will have some issue in the health in the future, because in fact we're altering a small part of the carrot, and it's not what you don't become what you eat, for instance. Okay, so you should not worry about that. And then there is the concern about changing human genes, creating design babies, to be very direct. So changing, for instance, an embryo, altering the genes so you have specifically some traits, some kind of I don't know, blue eyes or whatever you want. So there is the moral and the philosophical questions of who are we if we do that? Are we playing gods? Are we really truly changing human beings, so changing the essence of humanity? And that's mentioned in the episode, for instance. And surprise for most people in watching this show is not a surprise, but we know how to do this now. We have this technology called CRISPR Cas9, and I was surprised. I made some research before this show, and I'm absolutely amazed that it's been created in 2010. Okay, the paper was published in 2014, so that's quite a long time ago already. And CRISPR Cas9, it's basically a way for scientists to target a specific part of the DNA and modify this part of the DNA by putting a new type of DNA, a new code. So we can modify specifically a part of the DNA. We're not playing randomization here. We're not crossbreeding species, nothing like this. We are truly changing chemically the DNA of a species. This CRISPR-9 is being used. There is a ton of application. I have a list of them. I'm not going to bore you to death with that, but you can. There is a medical therapy. You can basically propose treatments to fix a genetic disorder, like illnesses coming from faulty genes. There is a lot of them. We know a lot of them. You can use CRISPR-Cas9 in agriculture to develop plants which are resistant to some type of pest sicknesses and so on. So you will have to use less of these chemicals to destroy those insects, for instance. You can use CRISPR-9 for basic research. So if you want to understand what a gene does, you just turn off the gene and you let the animal or the plants grow and you see what happens. And then finally, you can use CRISPR Cas9 for biotechnology. So to engineer pharmaceutical products or biofuel or any other products that will be useful in the future. So there is a lot of application with this technology. It's a remarkable technology when you think about it, and it's used a lot now in laboratories around the world because it can solve a lot of the problem we have in our current world. I mean, imagine that if we can grow plants that will use less water or grow plants that will be capable of resisting to some UV light, so grow at high altitude, for instance, we will solve a lot of problems for humanity, bringing food to in places where there is no food that can grow, for instance. So CRISPR-Cas9 is more than just um, details in the history of evolution of humanity. I think it's one of the game changer that we have seen, and a posteriori we realize that, like electricity and so on. It's a tool that will change or is changing currently the world we are living in.
That's a really great perspective on it. I want to, of course, challenge it because that's what we're here to do. Um, we're not talking in the show about plants and animals and doing things for the betterment of humanity as far as making sure we can feed everybody or use less water or whatever. We're talking about genetically modifying people,
Mm-hmm.
humans, and that is, you know, definitely when you start throwing the term eugenics around, this becomes an issue. Like, at what point, you know, is this allowed? Are people even allowed to do it right now? And you know, at what point do you draw the line and say there's a big difference between fixing a faulty gene and eliminating the diversity of our population by calling certain things faulty that aren't necessarily?
And that's a big question, and a lot of scientists are trying to answer to these questions and also trying to put some limit in what we can do. And fortunately, CRISPR-Cas9 is a very easy technology. I mean, you can make it in your garage. You can use this technology in your garage. So people are using it even with non-scientists or people outside the fringe of science who follow guidelines and so on are using it. But if you want to talk about that, we have an example of a scientist who basically used CRISPR-Cas9 to create a new type of human. His name is He Jiankyu. He's a Chinese scientist, and in November 2018, he claimed that he has created the world first human embryo edited using CRISPR-Cas9 to be resistant to HIV. And those embryos were implanted, and they're born. They become twin girls. And this news went around the world. I mean, you probably remember that. Everybody was saying, wow, scientists created super babies. Are they humans? We don't know. There's all these questions that came out of this. For Dr. E, it didn't go very well. I mean, scientifically speaking, he succeeded because the baby, in fact, was truly resistant to HIV, apparently. But then there was a lot of controversies around it because he did that in secret. He did that without even consulting the Chinese agency, which put regulations about this. He basically made the announcement after the fact. And people also pointing out a lot of reasons for which they were against this. One, it was not a necessity. I mean, there is a lot of way to make sure that a baby, HIV is not transmitted to a baby without having to modify the baby genetically speaking, the embryo genetically. We don't really know, at the time, and even more, we don't have a full control of CRISPR-Cas9. We know that there will be some unintended genetic modification happening. I mean, this is very complex. We're not talking about like we are looking at an helix and we decided the target and we press a button and it changes it. And we're talking about biology. It's still biology, a lot of chemistry and so on. So something can go wrong. You can modify a gene and modify another part of the genome somewhere else. And doing this on human being, it's extremely dangerous. And then there is also the fact that these modified babies are now human beings and now live among us, and they will bring this genetic modification, this artificial genetic modification, to their offspring, probably. So that means that we have created some kind of human with altered genes, and those altered genes will go from generation to generation in the future. And that's something dangerous because, as I mentioned, we don't really know what happened exactly to this genetic modification on the long term. So it didn't go well for Dr. He. I made some research. He went to jail, get 3 years of jail for illegal medical practice. He was also fined $500,000. Two of his colleagues went also to jail and got fined. He came out of jail quite recently, and Nature had a paper in February about him, where basically he refused to answer questions about his previous genome editing experiments. He has set up a non-profit organization, a laboratory in Beijing, and he focused on developing affordable therapies for hereditary disease. So he's still working on genetically modifying, fixing humanity by with genetic modification, but he's targeting specifically what we call the Duchenne muscular dystrophy. I don't really know much about that because I'm not a doctor, but it seems to be a sickness that is genetically transmitted from parents to children. So he's still working. He's still doing this research. You are muted, I think.
That is wild. I remember hearing vaguely about the genetic modification of an embryo and that there was controversy. I did not realize he had gone to jail, that others had gone to jail. So there are regulations in place that say don't do this thing. But as you've pointed out, this new CRISPR technology, the latest one, seems to, it's everybody can use it to do the thing, and so that's a little frightening. I mean, it comes down to like, who's in charge, who's holding the equipment, who's using it. Yes, it's a tool, but a lot of tools can be misused. So, how do we prevent that? We'll get back to the trial in just a minute, but I do have one other thing. Is genetic modification useful in space exploration? Is this something that has been spoken of? We talk about sending humans to space, but humans are not designed for space. They're not designed for a lack of gravity. Do we think that maybe we could do some genetic modification to make our, humans more
adapted to space and
adapted to space? Yeah.
Well, yes, I think that's the main reason we should continue this research in genetic modification of human being. I mean, I may shock people here, but I do believe that this is the way. If we want human beings to be able to live in space or to live on other planets, we will have to modify them, to modify human beings genetically. I mean, examples, you need to make humans more resistant to radiations if you want them to be able to travel through space, because radiation is extreme. We know how to do that. We don't know how to modify human yet, but we know the gene that make some type of animal more resistant to those radiation. It's been done in yeast and mice. Okay, so that's not science fiction. This is real. It happened. It already happened. I did some research about some other things, muscular atrophy, bone loss, and other problems related to living in microgravity can also be fixed, they believe, using genetic modification. They have created mice which have stronger bones and muscles. Okay, super mice. Remember we talked about that last time, but no, they know how to do it on mice. So yes, they can create those super strong mice, and they will be able to live in space in microgravity longer than a mice, normal mouse. And then, and that's a very point. That's a point that is mentioned in this episode. If you want to survive on another planet, if you want to be able to breathe a new type of atmosphere which doesn't have like nitrogen 70%, 20% oxygen, and some part of water and carbon dioxide and so on, you may need to modify human being, or even to be able to resist to the cold and the heat of the planet, because the planet may be closer or further away from the star. You may need to modify those human beings. And there is some research being done about that. There is no real scientific paper, very significant scientific paper published, but that's something that we may have to do. And this is mentioned in the show and shown, in fact. Can maybe go ahead, explain exactly the scene?
So one of the things that has to occur, so Una needs someone to defend her, and no one's willing to take the case. It's basically an open shut. She lied on her application. Someone turned her in. You know, what's the point of defending someone who's just going to lose? So Pike goes to find a former friend of Una's who is also Illyrian, but lives on a world where the atmosphere is not breathable for humans. There's a distinct lack of oxygen. And so if you are a non-genetically modified human, you have to have an oxygen mask on you. And there's a whole scene where he's basically trying to get in to see this person who doesn't want to see him. And he's basically like, no, I'm just going to sit here and run out of oxygen until you let me in to see her. And that's the reason why like the Illyrians are kind of on this world, is because regular humans can't just come and hang out. It takes work. And so, it's a big point as to like, look, we did this genetic modification so we can live here. And
Well,
now
you
we're
have
being
to wear this mask, and you are in danger of dying on every moment if there is a malfunction. They
Mhm.
naturally live on this planet. So I was thinking about at which moment a civilization may decide to do this, and who will take this decision. And I think it's gonna be another Far West story. It's gonna be a bunch of people going there and say, we are going to modify each other so we get our offspring will be able to breathe this type of atmosphere. And they arrive there, and most of them die, and a few of them survive, and they have babies, and they are on the planet forever. It's gonna be like that. It's not gonna be an organized movement where we're gonna say, okay, let's modify everybody today. It's not gonna happen like this.
It's going to be an overtime kind of thing.
Yeah. And it's gonna be a
And
messy process as usual with human beings.
of course. It seems like for humans, exploration usually is some kind of messy business. So we're basically at our half an hour. To sum it up, Una wins her case. She's granted asylum. She gets to go back to the ship. She's nervous for her reception. And it turns out everybody is just thrilled to have her back. Nobody cares really that she's Illyrian amongst her crew. It's just even La'an, who is of course descended from Khan Noonien Singh, is sort of like, it's fine. I thought maybe I had given you away, and it's like, no. So I really did like how it worked out. I thought it was, and really, these are the witness testimonies from Spock and La'an, and the way the lawyer sort of manipulates the answers in such a way to get Una to basically show that she has requested asylum. It is some of the finest writing I've seen, and it, like I said at the beginning of the episode, probably my second favorite courtroom drama of all of Star Trek, which is saying a lot. There's been a lot of courtroom drama. So, but yeah, it was really good. I really feel like, once again, Ethan Peck as Spock stealing the show almost every scene. There is a sidebar hilarious moment where he is like upset with this other Vulcan, and Mbenga's like, oh, he's upset, and Ortegas is going, how, no, he looks fine, and then Spock comes over and apologizes for his outburst, and I was just, that is peak Vulcan, and I love it. And so once again, the writing just was beautiful from beginning to end, and I really did enjoy this episode.
This is definitely one of the best Star Trek I've seen, to be honest. The entire series. So if people have not seen it yet, which is surprising, they're watching us, they have not seen it, you should really take the time to watch this Star Trek. It's one of the best one ever. To go back to Una, I know you wanted to finish, but one of the reasons she's accepted as she is because genetic modifications are extremely discreet. I mean, they're not like on the face of people. We don't see her having tentacles moving around or having superpowers or something like this. What we saw is when she was younger, she has a immune system which were glowing, and that's all. I don't know exactly what genetic modification she has.
It's explained a bit more in season 1. I think in the Ghosts of Illyria episode, where they talk about she's resistant to like viruses of all sorts. So this one virus that's going around, she's the person who can survive it, because basically her body just superheats and burns it out. And so but of course, when it does this, that's when you see the telltale sign that she has some sort of genetic modification, and that's what caused the problem.
Now I'm gonna ask you and our viewers something. Imagine like tomorrow a doctor come to see you and tell you, look, we have this product that's gonna modify you genetically speaking, and the advantage of that is that you will not be sick anymore and do not die of some sickness related to viruses. Will you take it? And if yes or if no, why not?
I probably would. I have enough health issues that if I could like eliminate anything that make my life a little bit easier and keep me from getting sick, I would do it. I definitely, obviously it would be a cost benefit analysis, but if everything leaned toward, this is safe and effective and there's not going to be any long-term issues, I would jump on it. I hate being sick. I hate having colds. I don't like it. It's not fun. And I end up with other issues on top of it. So I would totally take that.
Yeah, I will as well. As one, I'm one of the person who will love, in fact, to have this genetically modification, so we don't have to deal with all these issues, sicknesses, and so on. And yeah, if it's developed by doctors and with scientific studies, I will trust them. All right. Thank you.
All right. Well, that's it. We'll be back with the next episode in a couple of weeks. Don't forget to subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. Feel free to leave a comment or 5 with your thoughts and questions. And, of course, respond to Franck's question. Would you get a genetic modification to keep you from getting viruses? So thanks for watching, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.